I think the Biden family is a sort of a model for how China plays the long game to infiltrate into the highest reaches of American power elites. And Joe Biden was targeted very early on by Zemin, actually, when he was the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And he went on a trip to China organised by Zemin at that time. And he was met with the Chinese Communist Party top dogs, and they took him to an island. I can't pronounce the name, but it's the equivalent of Martha's Vineyard in China. And there they plied him with information about how wonderful China was and how China was a rising democracy and was, embracing freedom and just wanted to become wealthy, and that China was no threat. And of course, Joe Biden swallowed all of that, and it's I think a great tragedy for America that a man like Joe Biden, who is, I would say, a hollow man without any real values, easily bought, and not too bright, should have been targeted so early by the Chinese Communist Party and have been such a useful tool to them in his entire career. And now he is president, of course. And I mean, in 1979, when Joe Biden came back to America, he was waxing lyrical about China and what a wonderful place it was and how it was going to be our friend. And, one of his most famous lines was, nothing to fear here, they're not going to eat our lunch, that's a joke. He was so gushing in his praise for China that he was mocked actually by the Weekly Standard at the time for his extreme gullibility. And that sort of love affair with China continued for Joe Biden. 2001, he was, an influential senator. I think he was still chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he was instrumental in allowing China into the World Trade Organization. Most of the negativity was coming from his own party, from the Democrats. This was during Clinton's presidency. He managed to overcome that resistance, and so, of course, that marked the sort of end of the sort of manufacturing, middle class of middle America. And I think that, Joe Biden ever since then has had this sort of delusion that he is somehow has some special insight into China. He was duchessed early on by now President Xi, when President Xi was vice president, when Barack Obama was president of the US, and Joe Biden was his vice president. And so Biden and Xi met several times. You hear Joe Biden often boasting about the number of hours that he spent with President Xi, who is a chemical engineer, who is, whatever else you say about him, he's an intelligent man. And for him to spend hours and hours talking to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden, we know how he speaks. He talks malarkey, he tells tall tales, he big notes himself. President Xi has obviously made a study of Joe Biden to spend so much time with him over the years. And for one reason, and that is to explore the weaknesses in America, to satisfy himself of his own superiority, intellectual superiority and moral superiority to America. And I think, therefore, Joe Biden has not been a good representative for America to earn any respect, from China, certainly from President Xi.
Something you mentioned back in 2001, you said most of the opposition came from the Democratic Party. I think that's correct. I guess what I was thinking as you're describing all this is this was very much a bipartisan love affair.
Yes. With
the Chinese Communist Party. And I think the Chinese Communist Party was an equal opportunity influence peddler.
And still is.
And still is. Mm-hmm. And still is. But what you describe in Laptop from Hell, which is, curiously captured, in some more intricate detail because of the existence of the laptop, is I think, not the exception. It's kind of more the rule that this kind of activity happens. What do you think? That's what I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I think influence peddling is a Washington disease and it's bipartisan. I do think Joe Biden is a master at it. And look, I guess because of the laptop and because of the sort of Hunter Biden's former business partners who I've had the opportunity to talk to, and also because of the work of the Republican senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, and they're sort of tracing the money trail from China, Russia, Ukraine, other countries into the bank accounts in America of the Biden family and their various associates. I have a very good picture of exactly how Joe Biden was targeted and influenced by and used by the Chinese Communist Party through his family.
The cover-up of this whole situation has become the big scandal, and so even as much as what exists on the laptop and what we know from there. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the laptop may end up being bigger than the corruption story itself, because it involves the FBI and because of what we have learned about how the laptop itself was buried by the FBI, how the FBI then apparently, and we only have circumstantial evidence really, but it certainly, and we'll know more when Elon Musk reveals all, but it certainly seems as if the FBI colluded with big tech to suppress the laptop before the election. And then you have the 51 former intelligence officials, these top CIA directors, acting directors and so on, who are also, whether or not they colluded with the Biden campaign and Democratic operatives, I don't know, but they certainly interjected themselves into the election campaign to dishonestly traduce the New York Post's reporting and say the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. So that was a concerted effort by the security apparatus to crush this story that was damaging to one of the two candidates for president. And, I think it's really important to remember with this story that people talk about the Hunter Biden laptop, but it's not about Hunter Biden, who is this, 52-year-old, I think former drug addict, crack addict, who had a terrible period, during most of the laptop's coverage of being, a raging crackhead, addicted to prostitutes, living this dissolute life, spending vast sums of money and ricocheting around the world and hanging out with the sort of worst oligarchs and the sort of inner sanctum of the Chinese Communist Party, the inner sanctum of Vladimir Putin's court. And so just the most bizarre and sort of interesting story, and a tale of great tragedy because he had his own personal demons. But it's not about Hunter Biden, it's about Joe Biden. So Joe Biden had this, he talks always about being the poorest man in Congress, but actually he lived a very lavish lifestyle. He lives in, a beautiful mansion, always bought and sold houses well above his, purported salary, dresses well. His entire family, benefited from grace and favour jobs and government sinecures and scholarships and judge clerkships and so on. And Hunter Biden's role in that was to be the bag man, to be the guy who would, as in his own words, give half his salary to his father, who would, in his own words, again from the laptop, had to support the entire family, and he became quite resentful of that. So I think, the cover-up is a big story, but also you can't lose sight of the fact that this is a story about Joe Biden, and that is why the cover-up was so concerted.